Jesus Christ!
Saw is a third-person horror game based on the film franchise of the same name.
Why are you doing this? I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It was just... I was at a bar. I had to get home. He was in the middle of the street. Just came right out in front of me. I didn't mean to hurt him.
You framed an innocent man.
Atmosphere. There's a strong feeling of disgust you get from the very start when it comes to the dirty, derelict environment you spend your time in. The disused hospital is falling apart, but is still somehow inescapable. The level of darkness makes exploring the hospital totally nerve-wracking, as numerous deadly things lurk in the darkness. Despite being given several choices of lighting, none of them really provide you with sufficient light to see everything, so you're always at a disadvantage. But the sheer number of traps keeps the stress, tension, and paranoia at a dizzying high. Around every corner lurks something that could kill you instantly, and the threat never seems to go away. That's one Harry Mason. Scares. I find this game is utterly terrifying. It'll lure the player into a room to lock the door behind them, start a timer and force them to solve a puzzle before the room explodes, or put tripwires in pitch black darkness that when tripped, fires a shotgun that kills you instantly. But one of the worst is the bomb collar around the player's neck that'll detonate on proximity with someone else who has one. There aren't many games that inflict actual fear into me like this, but there are so many things to be wary of, and just hearing my collar beep is enough to put me on edge, or make me jump out of my seat as Detective Tap's now headless body falls over a tripwire. The entire game is one long gauntlet where everything you do wrong inflicts death. One thing that did fail the game a little was how easy melee combat was, to the point where I could stun lock most regular enemies with a light punch until they died. But the enemies were the least frightening thing anyway. Ultimately, it's still a miasma of features that induce panic, startle, or even jump scare you. That's two Harry Masons. Sound design. The music that plays is pretty interesting, with a surprising amount of variance, some cool haunting pieces that act as ambiance, and some nail-biting tension builders that make solving puzzles all the more stressful. The sound effects are all loud and punchy and cut through the soundtrack to make you jump. Jigsaw's voice acting is fantastic and the victims are fairly good, but some of the repeated calls to hurry up and solve the puzzle do get repeated a lot, which can get a little annoying. Directional audio helps locate the beeping of someone else's collar and is well implemented here, and the iconic giggle of Jigsaw's puppet when you die is the icing on the cake. That's three Harry Masons.
Me if I brought him here. My game is over.
Gore. The gore in the game is ripped straight from the infamous things witnessed in the films, bringing back the iconic collar that'll rip your jaw off in the first few moments of the game. But there's a lot of deeply unpleasant things, from shoving your hand into a toilet bowl full of needles, to standing in broken glass with your bare feet. It's Saw, the video game. We all knew it wasn't going to be light on the gore. It does cut away sometimes instead of showing you what happens when the collar goes off, which is a little disappointing, but it excels in lots of other ways. That's four Harry Masons. Story. The story is a continuation of the film and sees Detective Tap, who's been kidnapped by Jigsaw and must save 6 victims that have something to do with his past to earn his freedom. It's entertaining seeing people return from the first film, but what it really does rely heavily on you seeing the first film to make a lot of sense. I had to re-watch the first film to understand what was going on. There's plenty of interesting diary entries, and some of which were relevant and some which were not so relevant. It's good, but if you haven't watched the first film, it'll leave you out in the cold, and maybe it would have been better just to make a new story from the start. Making the final score 4 out of 5 Harry Masons. The game is utterly nerve-wracking, but does get a bit repetitive as each chapter is usually more of the same thing and you end up doing a lot of the same puzzles again. Not being a huge fan of the films, I didn't have high expectations of the game, but it's actually really good. Again, I'd like to remind you this whole thing is down to my opinion in horror games, and if you don't share this opinion, then that's cool, I get it. I'd like to point out that whilst I did hate the sound of beeping, I did not scream like a banshee or run away from the computer, and advise you don't either. There'll be more horror reviews in the pipeline, and thanks for watching, and always go check out Bumps in the middle of the night. Peace.